Hey, it's Kate. You're watching and listening to the CMO Show, and I've got a most amazing guest today. It's Megan Lueders, CMO of Silicon Labs. I loved our chat. I learned so very much, and I know you will too, so listen and enjoy. Hey, it's Kate, and you are watching and listening to the CMO Show with Kate Gunning. That's me. And I've got an ATX icon with me today. You can't drive over the South Congress Bridge without seeing the logo for the company that she represents. It's Silicon Labs, and she's Megan Lueders. Hey.
Hi, how are you?
I'm great.
Thanks
so much for coming.
Yeah, thanks for having me. I'm excited.
We're grateful to have you here. It's going to be fun.
It will be.
And I'm excited to get to know you. I've heard a lot about you, but we've never had the chance to sit down with each other. So
yes,
this will be fun.
We'll get to know a lot about each other and other people and our thought processes on the CMO role.
And speaking of which, before we went on air, you mentioned that you think that there's something that CMOs can provide beyond just their seat as CMOs. You want to talk a little bit about that before we get into the meat of our chat?
Yeah, absolutely. And it's something I think CMOs bring such a rare talent to organizations, not necessarily those that they sit and represent every day, but those in the community. And that can be in the form of nonprofits or even positions on other boards. And I'll talk a little bit about, from a nonprofit perspective, often nonprofits are looking for leaders that embody the brand or they're passionate about the cause. And boards from nonprofits really want to span all layers of expertise. They want finance, they want lawyers, they want maybe medical professions, just depends on that specialty. Well, with CMOs and people with marketing expertise, every nonprofit really needs to understand how to market to their constituents, their base, their donor base, to the customers that maybe they want to serve, or the people they're trying to help. And so with a marketing background, that expertise can really lend itself well in a boardroom. And because marketers really span more than just the advertisement or the branding or the getting to know the customers, they understand the business aspect too. They really bring a wide variety of expertise to those conversations. And so CMOs are in demand for nonprofits, and myself, I sit on 4 nonprofits. Yeah, 2 within the UT system, so it's a little different there, and then 2 that are community led.
Well, that's great. Okay, so give us some tips. How do we find our nonprofit seats or board seats for people who've not done that before? What do they do to get started?
Yeah, first, I think it comes down to, you have to figure out what your passion is. Find a nonprofit that maybe you associate with or that you are drawn to that cause. For me, it was one in particular started with cancer, and I had a father that was diagnosed, and so I wanted to give back in a capacity that would serve a cancer community. And so this was for Texas 4000. And another one may be a passion that you have. Could be religious, it could be education, it could be anything, but find that passion. And once you find it, whether you sign up to be a volunteer or whether you just call the executive director and let them know that you have an interest to serve. And again, that serving may be just start out as a volunteer, or ask if there's a committee where they take members at large and you dip your toe in the water. Oftentimes what you think the organization is about may be different once you kind of peel that layer and get behind the scenes. And so serving on a committee is a great way to look inside, but not necessarily commit yourself in quite the same way.
Mm-hmm. I love that. I think what can be really fun is finding ways we can apply our creativity without doing marketing itself. Right. So what you're describing is a way to do that, a way to flex your creative mind in a format that might be a little bit different.
Right. Whether it's leveraging the network we have, from a PR perspective, or again, how do we reach customers, or even simple things like we need to send an executive director email to our members, and can you just take a look? Can you just have that extra pair of eyes? And we just may have that level of expertise from a marketing lens perspective, but again, overall from a business sense, we really, as CMOs, tend to understand that entire customer journey, or that entire discussion that a nonprofit has when they're trying to reach an individual, whether they're trying to reach them and provide a service, or whether they're trying to reach them and seeking funds or assistance, or delivering something of value. A marketer can really lend that time and talent and creativity, and again, that network that oftentimes nonprofits just don't have access to.
Yeah, absolutely. What about board seats?
And board seats come pretty naturally at that same path. So once you volunteer to serve on a committee, you start to see the inner workings. You are exposed more to some of the other board members. You ask about their recruitment cycle. Is one way to do it. And another good way is Green Lights is an organization in town that you can go to. And Green Lights is always advertising nonprofits that are looking for board seats.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. And or they can place you. They can say, okay, tell us what your passions are, tell us what your interests are, and let's connect you. And so that's another great organization. But really it starts with, in Austin, we are very fortunate to live in a community that has hundreds and hundreds of nonprofits. So
Yes.
the sooner you narrow down maybe an area of interest, you start to just kind of maybe scope them out, maybe attend one of their events, see if you know anyone that is affiliated with it, and you become familiar, then it's very easy to just make an outreach to the executive director or one of the board chairmen and let them know your interest. And again, start small. Oftentimes I recommend serving on that committee. And then when the time is right, or your interest is peaked, then you say, hey, I'm maybe interested in taking that next step. Because with a board seat, it does come with commitment. It comes with, it's not just time. Usually there's financial obligations, there's
Sure.
networking obligations, and you want to make sure the time is right for you as well.
Yeah, absolutely. Okay, so you're suggesting if you want to get involved in the nonprofit, that we should pick a topic or topics that we feel passionate about, maybe make a list of prospective organizations that we might be interested in, reach out directly. And then there are resources like Greenlight, I think you said it's called, that you could be more directly engaged with if you want to have them come to you about opportunities that relate to your interests.
Right. And they have classes that will teach you what is it like to be on a nonprofit board, what to expect. Cool. And, the other recommendation would be go meet with someone that's on a board, whether you're bound to know somebody that serves on a board, even if it's not a board that you're necessarily aligned with.
Yes.
Just ask them what it's like. What is your experience? And every nonprofit that I sit on is completely different from the other. And one may be stronger here and lighter here in terms of their advancements or their business discipline, or
Sure.
how far they have been in the journey. Maybe they're a newer nonprofit, but just speaking to someone that has served in those board capacities can give another glimpse into what you may expect and how you may be able to offer your talents.
Yeah, that's great.
Yeah.
I love that. And is there a point in your career when you recommend starting to consider this, or?
I think a lot of life changes. We all make choices of where we're going to work and where we're going to give our time to based on our own personal availability. And when I had younger kids, it was hard for me to give of my time.
Not a full-time job and four nonprofit seats.
Exactly. Now that I'm a little older, the kids are a little bit older, more self-sufficient, it is a little bit different to balance my time. And so I would say there's not a particular time, but there was certainly a moment when I felt I had something to give and I could give in a different way. And so my first nonprofit experience was actually with the YMCA of Austin. And I was young. I was in my 20s, not married, no kids. And I served on a smaller committee. It was one of the branches and a committee there. And so it really allowed me to understand how a branch worked and how I could give some time and some talent, but I didn't know enough. I knew I was not mature enough to sit at that next level, but I had the ability to observe. And so I volunteered to serve as a branch liaison to the larger, I'll say Austin branch. And so after a couple of years of doing that, I felt like I had enough experience. My career had really continued to grow. And I had the time to serve at that next level up. But there's no right or wrong time, but you have to you have to make sure that you can give to the organization because they're expecting that. Or you're taking a seat of somebody else that maybe has that time or that capacity to serve in that way. But it varies. These boards I serve on, the ages range. But I will say most of them are probably mid to late career.
Okay. So mid to late career, and you got to have the heart and the time.
You do.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And what do you think it is about you as a leader, as a marketer, as a woman that has made you passionate about nonprofit, just in general? Because it seems like you have been for a long time.
Yeah, I think a lot of it was my upbringing, and a lot of that started in late high school, but college, and I did go to UT, and a lot of the organizations I was involved with had a philanthropic component, and I got to see how you can serve and give back to a community, and it didn't mean that you had to give necessarily with dollars all the time. Giving of your time is one of the rarest and most precious assets that you can give. And so I saw that, and I saw the direct impact that you could have as an individual, as a student. And that was just something that carried forward. And companies that I look to that maybe are attractive to me, I also want to make sure that they have an alignment to the community in some capacity, or they have the ability for us to build that, or and approach how they serve in a different way than perhaps what they had considered, or what they're doing today is exactly what I was looking for. So, but it's something that I think based on your life journey or your life circumstances, it may impact you or it may come to you differently than others. I know one of the boards I served on, the reason my partner in crime, he was the chairman for years and I was the vice chair, was because he had a family situation, and that's what called and pulled on his heartstrings to give us his time to that organization. So it just depends for everybody. It's a little different.
I think the same of CMOs, that our life's journey really impacts who we are as CMOs even more than our actual on resume experience. We talk a lot about that on the show. It's like you have qualities about you and your sensibility and how you approach problems and how you think of things and how you gather people together, right? That really impact who you are as a leader, who you are as a marketer. And so what I love about what you're highlighting here is how that can apply to an area of opportunity that's adjacent to your role as a CMO, but it's a really nice complement.
It is. And because the role of the CMO is much more broad than we don't just put advertisements up, or we don't just send emails.
We don't.
we are much more complex than that. And it looks more like a business.
Yes.
Especially when you're a CMO that is responsible from, I'll call it cradle to grave, or has the access to the data to be influential from cradle to grave. It looks much more of a business, like a business management, than it does just an advertisement or communication or an event.
Yeah, that's absolutely right. And tell me, so what do you think the most important trait for a CMO or a person in marketing is?
Today, I'd say in the last decade, if you look at marketing as a discipline, and I tell especially students this all the time, that marketing is the fastest changing discipline of any in an organization. The technology has changed. How you reach the consumer has changed. Consumer buying behaviors is dramatically different today. Where you shop, how you shop, the on-demand aspect of what you want to be, how you want to be communicated with, how you want to purchase, your desire to interact with sales, all of that has changed. And fundamentally, the infrastructure to provide that education, the data analytics that can help you be smarter about where you make your investments, all that has not only changed, it is rapidly advancing. By the time you have something deployed, there's something new, a better mousetrap. And so one of the traits that every marketer has to have is the ability to adapt, the ability to be flexible, and the innate desire to just be curious and constantly learn, because what they knew coming out of school may not apply by the time they enter the workforce. And you look at what's happening with Chat GPT.
Yeah.
I mean, there's a brand new technology, a universe of technology that as marketers, and not just marketers, businesses are going to have to really figure out how they embrace what they do with it, how it may help them become more efficient. And I know the hat I wear, I've already gone to the team a couple ways and said, hey, let's experiment with this and that, where we've got these ongoing programs. I said, what if we were to take the output of this program and let's leverage chat, see what we can get out of it.
See what it says.
And let's experiment a little bit. And if we're not challenging ourselves to do that and don't have that curiosity, we won't advance as quickly as we need to. But I think there's something to be said about teaching, especially a younger generation who thinks they're ready and ripe to adapt and be flexible, but then showing them what that really means in the workplace are oftentimes two different things.
I agree. And how do you learn?
It's a couple different ways. And in fact, it's one of the KPIs we have for our team is to ensure that we are constant learners. And so we really strive to allow the time for our team to learn. And while, the company may offer tools and techniques, one of the ways in which I share how I learn is I have a community of marketers that I regularly go to. There's podcasts that I listen to. There's books and just educating that learning comes in a variety of ways. It's not necessarily going to some $5,000 trade show. In fact, that's probably not what I would recommend, or even a conference. It's conferences can be great, but I get a lot more out of a conversation with, let's say, another CMO and say, hey, how are you thinking about this challenge? Or what are you guys up to? And I do that regularly with a community of CMOs. And so we hear best practices or we just are seeking advice. But again, it comes in a variety of ways. And over the pandemic, I became very conditioned and changed. Everyone had to change how they were working out and change how they were spending time. And I became a prolific walker during that time in the neighborhood. And I've listened to a lot of podcasts and a lot of books. And that is how I learn. But again, everyone's a little different. A lot of people will do online learning courses. It just depends on the discipline. The more technical, it tends to be workshops and courses. And that's great for that discipline. And in other cases, it may be more interaction through discussions.
Learning on the job, so to speak.
Yeah. And, one thing that we implemented is if we ever do go to a conference or if we ever are in an environment where maybe we spent half a day with one of our vendors and they were telling us best practices, we'll do a lunch and learn. We'll bring in lunch and we will describe what happened or what did you learn? What was your takeaway from that? And that's the expectation of anybody who's going to a conference or attending some sort of workshop.
That's good.
Yeah.
What are your favorite podcasts other than this one, obviously, and books? Can you give us a list?
Yeah, I do listen to several of the CMO podcasts, and there are a lot to choose from, and sometimes I'll tune into SaaStr because SaaStr is always, they're talking to CROs, they're talking to CMOs, they're talking to presidents and founders. And so it's kind of a wide variety. And so SaaStr's fun, not in a SaaS-based business today, but it's fun to tune in every now and again. This podcast is great and you get unique perspectives. I've sat on a couple that will talk about the marketer's journey and just hearing what people's career paths are. B2B technology is good. I mean, there's a variety. And I will also say I don't always listen to marketing ones either, right? Sometimes you want to listen to how something was invented and, it piques that curiosity of how a product was built or what went through their mind. And then that helps you become a better marketer of how you reach that customer if you happen to be in that field. And so sometimes, diverging outside of your bubble is what is the best recipe for learning.
I agree with what you're saying about perspective and the need to have broad perspectives. And I love what you said, particularly about SaaStr, hearing from CROs, presidents. I think that makes us stronger as CMOs because we can then relate to what the people on the leadership team are thinking about. And one of my favorite books lately is called Alchemy, and it's about things that are contrary to what people think would make sense, like zippers, bicycles, right? Like when those concepts first came out, people were like, what? Yep. But it's a bicycle. Of course, it's a bicycle. So
commonplace today, but really extraordinary back then.
Yes, extraordinary. And somebody had to believe enough and okay, it's a fresh perspective. It's a new idea. Let's go for it.
Absolutely.
Yes. Okay. So share with me, if you can, about your point of view on fresh perspectives on teams and how you think about bringing people up into organizations, the way that you lead, what does it look like when we're on Megan's team?
So I'm a big believer of building a culture within a team and having strong team camaraderie. And with marketing, I don't know of any marketing team that can function well and really create that engine if they don't have great players that want to be there, that have that desire to be curious, to learn, and to be flexible and adaptable, but that they are passionate about the cause, right? And the cause being defined by goals and KPIs, but there's a vision and a strategy that has been very well outlined for them. And so, I'm very conscious of making sure that we have a team that's assembled that has all those components. And when I hire oftentimes for passion and someone that can really display that they have the passion to want to grow and that has the propensity to grow and how they've learned to become the person they are today and what they're open to doing in the future is really kind of a key ingredient. And oftentimes, with many disciplines, you can teach them a skill, and marketing in so many ways you can as well, because it is changing, right? Technology I'm using today, I didn't use 2 years ago. And so I can teach somebody that. What I can't teach them is how to be passionate about where they are and what they do and finding a way to collaborate and being good communicators. And I think those are all really key ingredients to make a good team. But further, a good team has to be good teammates outside of their own bubble. And so with marketers, we're ultimate collaborators and communicators. And so we have to make sure that we have a balance. Not everybody is that external communicator, and we want to recognize and respect that. But how can we be the evangelist for those that may have a role where they're not the ones evangelizing or broadcasting their results or broadcasting that data, but those that are in that role and capacity can do so very effectively.
Yeah. And tell me what you think about turnover as a topic and how I think you have thoughts about that for CMOs, but also just for people who are on marketing teams in general. Can you share your view on that?
Everyone's faces turnover, and especially in this climate, right? You see a lot of layoffs, and those are inevitable. That it happens. When I look at a team dynamic, I mean, been around for a long time. I'm old, and earlier in my career, I would look at who we're bringing onto the team, really try to cultivate them and make them strong leaders. And I realized very early that if I do my job right, these are people that are going to have wings that I'm going to give them. And I'm going to give them all the tools to make them be ultra successful at their next role. And I may not have that capability to provide them that next step up. And that's okay. That is not a bad thing. And that's very real. But for them to get that next step up in their career, they may have to go elsewhere. And I applaud that. And I look at, if I can keep someone for 2.5 to 3.5 years as a younger marketer, that's great. And I'm super proud of those folks that have been on my team. And I look at it now, I have well over a dozen, and probably closer to 24 people that have worked for me that are now VPs or CMOs themselves. And
that's such a good feeling.
It's such a good feeling. I mean, that's why I do what I do. I don't do it just for me. I do it really so that I can bring up this next generation, and the people that you surround yourself by are 10 times smarter than you are, right? Yeah. And that's what makes for a great team, but it really allows for that person to shine. And if you can give them that career growth to shine within your organization and keep moving up, fantastic. And at some point, maybe you can't, but if you can go help them, propel them to be bigger somewhere else, fantastic. And you never know how those intersections come back together in the future. And I'm a big proponent of that. And marketing is just a discipline where I think that is much more commonplace. I will say not all organizations or disciplines, I should say, departments and disciplines are like that, right? And a lot of that is attributed to the fact that just marketing changes so often, whereas other disciplines are more constant.
I agree. I love reconnecting with people from my past.
Yes.
And finding a new way to work together, a new thing to learn from each other. Right. It's so fun.
Right. And you're excited to see their journey grow. Yes. And if you can say, I was there from the beginning, or,
and now you're teaching me.
Exactly. Or, they're presenting to you. And I had, when I moved back to Austin, the person that I came to work for, she told me, she goes, I'm going to be working for you one day. And I was young. I mean, I was 24 maybe.
Like, say what?
And I was like, I don't know about that. I mean, she was older. She had a child already, 1 or 2. And I was like, I don't know about that. And sure enough, that happened.
That's
and
so cool.
It's very cool. And, I cherish relationships. I'm very much a people person, and I am loyal. And that's what makes for allowing you to be able to let someone else shine in the spotlight and see their career grow. I'm not going to be working forever. So,
exactly.
We gotta do our part to educate and build that next layer.
I totally agree. I think that's it's something that is important to remember and reflect on, because it can get so competitive day to day, I think, for people, even when you're thinking about your next role and where you want to go and who's also maybe looking at that same place. And I think that's happened a lot more frequently in the last couple of years with turnover being where it is and people of similar skill sets kind of tribing together and then vying for similar roles. I've seen that happen a lot in my community, and it can feel kind of icky.
Yes. Yeah. And takes you back to those high school days
a
little bit.
We don't need that
for that. No, you got to build everyone up.
Yeah, love each other through.
Yes. And especially, women in tech, and you do want to build each other up. And that's where having a strong community of other marketers that really want to empower you. I'm part of a empowered CMO network. And I'm so in awe of how much there's encouragement of one another. Hey, let me take a look at this and let me help you. And they're not competing for the same job, or maybe they are, but they're willing to give of their time to help someone else succeed. And what a gift. What a gift to be able to do that. And if we can keep deploying that down at the younger generations and educate them and show them how to do that, then, we'll groom them to be those same folks as they get older.
Yeah. I think there's another powerful thing in what you're saying too. It's like a sort of underlying connotation, which is taking the time to build relationships. And the world that we're operating in can be so chaotic, but really taking the time. What I'm hearing and what you're saying, but you're not saying the actual words, is that too. It's like share moments with each other, connect with each other, take the time to do that. And then what you can discover can be very powerful.
Right. It's like networking. And I took a sabbatical.
Oh, good for you.
Yes.
Gosh, I'm jealous. How'd you do it? What'd you do? Where'd you go?
I did it. And, it's something I absolutely encourage everyone to do. Yeah. And I think we're all running so fast. So many miles an hour, whether it's our mind is always on, whether we're up late because we have some idea, whatever it is, our family lives.
Yeah.
And when we have the opportunity to take a pause, it's great to do so. And I did it many years ago, and I was adamant about taking 6 months of time. And what I used that time for was, one, just to reconnect on the family side. I had younger kids and really just needed a breather. I'd worked at a company for 9 years, and it was fantastic, but it was a good opportunity to just spend some quality time with them. But how I used my days was I'll call it networking. But I met with people. I was, I'm interested in Kate and what she's doing. And she's got this new podcast. Let me go ask her how it started.
Yeah.
And I spent time just asking people what they do. How do they do it? I didn't want anything. I wasn't looking for the next connection. I was just wanting to learn and grow. But at the same time, it allowed me to have that constant curiosity of exploring and taking the time to get to know people that, you're so rushed. You see someone, you say hello, but you don't get the time to get to know them. And that sabbatical happened to let me do that. But what I learned from it, again, it was many years ago, is that is something that is instilled in me, right? Yeah. How do I keep up with that community? Yeah. How do I ensure that you preserve those relationships? And I'm not as great as I want to be just because life happens. Totally. But I'm very mindful of those that, you want to keep close. And I have a personal board of directors for that reason.
That's nice. Yeah. That's a good tip from Megan.
Yes.
Personal board of directors. I like that.
Just, the people that you go to, it's not every day, but you go to this person for that type of advice, or when you want to touch base on a topic, and you have this person in your network that might be able to lend an ear. If you've got another question or item that a situation you're going through. And so that personal board of directors is assembled. And it changes, right? It's assembled at some point of your life, and you may have different players come and go, but they're who you lean on when you need that.
Yeah, learning without a motive.
Right. And networking without a motive,
yes.
right? You don't have an agenda. Not having an agenda sometimes is the best way to get to know somebody, but also connect in a different way, and you feel human again.
Yeah, I love that. Tell me, is there a quality in people or other CMOs, other leaders that you admire a lot? Like when you see it in someone, you just think like, that's just a quality that I think is magical.
There's so many talented CMOs out there, and some specialize in being great visionaries and articulate with the word. Others are brilliant at brand and creativity, and you can't help but be in awe for every one of those great qualities and characteristics. But at the end of the day, the CMO that understands what they're there to do and how they're going to be able to do that and assemble a great team to do so, and care and have some empathy, and trust of the kind of that journey is really, what maybe I'll call is inspiring. But every CMO or every discipline, you look at a big company, a Cisco or an Adobe, that CMO looks very different than the CMO of a startup that is, trying to put all the pieces of the puzzle together and just get through the day to day. And it seems like much more tactical execution. And so the characteristics of that CMO looks very different than that of, at let's say a Fortune 100 company.
Yes. But regardless, on an emotional level, what I've heard a lot from you is this thread around heart. You talked about passion, having empathy, caring, inspiring. It's like heart,
but not coddle.
Yeah.
Right?
Yes.
Very big distinction, right? I'm not there to coddle. Not going to coddle, but have heart. But you have heart because you care, because you are passionate, and you're passionate for the company. You're passionate to achieve goals. You're passionate about celebrating
all
at that
layers.
Victory line, and you're passionate about seeing someone grow and bloom from their career and education perspective. But man, that success is awesome when you achieve it, and when you achieve it together as a company or as a team or as an individual, and you want to see that. And I do have a lot of care to me, but I'm also very determined, and I have goals, and you can balance both.
Yes.
And have a great team that really shows up every day, that wants to work and try to achieve those with you.
Yeah, much like parenting.
Oh goodness.
Like, I love you, but you're going to room.
That's right. We need some time.
Let's just take space for 5 minutes. Okay, how about that?
Yes. And even with parenting though, as you've got young kids, and mine are a little older, and those conversations change. As well, right? It's just like as a company grows, or as a company shrinks, or as a company gets reorganized, and or turnover happens, how those conversations go changes.
There's that adaptability there.
Yes, yes. And it's funny when you do interview, people know that we'll talk to them about change and say, how do you deal with change? Or what do you tell me about an instance when you've changed? There's people that will always ask those questions. But when you really get to the root of it, and when they go through change, it's very different going through it than it is saying it and saying, "Oh, I'm cool with it. No problem. I have change all the time. That happens." But as marketers, as CMOs in particular, we have to change on a dime.
Literally.
I mean, it's, hey, we're no longer doing this. We're pivoting, and we need you to show up here. COVID was a great example. I mean, when I started,
didn't you start right around?
I started about almost September of 2019. So it was right before COVID, and the digital infrastructure just did not exist to allow us to have a conversation with customers digitally. From webinars to emails, there was just a lot of infrastructure that needed to be put in place to enable that. And on top of that, you had an organization that was saying, what's going on? How are we going to do this? And how can you help put some communications infrastructure in place?
And you're new.
And I'm new. And I don't know anyone. And, the culture it was very different because people were used to getting on planes or visiting with customers in person, having two-way conversations face to face. And so how were you going to bridge all of that? And there was myself and two other executives were put on kind of this tiger COVID task team to go figure out how are we going to communicate with the company. That was kind of first priority. What are we going to put in place? How often? What are we going to do? And what's great about the outcome of those conversations and kind of that strategy is that it's still implemented today.
Yeah, that's good.
And it's now part of our culture of how we communicate, even the video, right? And this is societal, I think. A societal change that's come about from COVID is that now we are so accustomed to being on video.
Yeah.
And my roots were in video. And so I had no fear of turning on that video camera every day, but because of the pandemic, now all of us do. And so we've come to expect that, but how do we maintain that now that we're in the kind of this post world, and keep to kind of the discipline that we established with the communications that were so important to us when we couldn't see face to face. So it's those things that really allow us to grow, allow us to change the dynamic of teams, how we operationalize, how we become more efficient, but ultimately how we adapt and scale.
Yeah. Okay, I have a couple of quick hit questions for you before we wrap up because I just want to know what you think.
Okay.
I can't close without finding out the answers to a couple of key questions.
Okay.
I could talk to you for a very long time and I'm looking at the clock and I'm like, ooh. Okay, so how would you articulate your superpower?
Superpower.
Yes.
I'd say transformational growth. And, if you'd asked me that question earlier in my career, I'd say something different. But over the last 10 years or so, what I have been able to come in and the opportunities I look for are those where maybe something's broken, maybe something needs transformed, maybe the transformation is in process and it has yet to be figured out what it's going to look like at the end of the day. But being able to come into an organization and outline and strategize of where and how we can take this company, because the second piece of that is growth. How do you scale it? And so I'd say I'd put both of those together. Transformational growth is the superpower.
What would you have said at the beginning?
At the beginning of my career, I would have probably leaned more on operational efficiencies and it was a fast and furious. I mean, when I started my career, I was in product marketing.
Yeah. Oh, wow.
And that's how I started. And defining that customer. And then it quickly transitioned to, now how do I reach the customer? And there was no such thing as even a demand generation team.
Right.
And how do you pick up the phone to call them? I was Eloqua's one of their first customers, sending that first email blast to 100,000 people. Yeah, it's very scary. So
you're like press it.
And it was much more operational integrity, infrastructure scale, and it was fast scale.
Well, and it's cool to see, literally, if you look at your career, how that has evolved to where you are. Right? Like they're all connected. Adaptability, which you admire so greatly, is certainly part of both of those things, which is cool.
Yes.
And how about on the other side? What do you feel like you're like, I just can't, I am not good at that. And I need people that are around me.
Yes, I can do that. If my kids answered that question, it'd be one thing.
My son's like, Mom, why do you make me mad so much?
Yeah.
I'm like, I'm not making you mad. Let's just be clear. You're the one not following the rules.
So funny. Yes. Just follow them and then we're all good.
Follow them and then we'll be fine. Well, I'll be fine.
Yes. I think you have to become human. And I realize it's funny, at the end of this year, I had the same issue with myself that I did the last 3 years or 4 years. I delay on expense reports all the time. I just let them build up. And so I've made my personal agenda to get those in on time. But bigger picture than that, I realize I need to surround myself with someone that can take what I verbalize. I'm a much better verbalizer. That's a word. I'm someone that can much better articulate what an email should say or what a communication should articulate than I am a writer. And I can write, but it might take me 3 times as long as it would take you. And knowing that my best trait is editing or coming up with kind of the framework, the story, what we should talk about, some of the key bullets, is definitely where my strength is, where I need to surround myself with people that can do it so much faster is take what I'm saying and
Make
translate
it
that.
something.
Yes. And they're brilliant at it. And again, the whole team is that way. I look at every discipline of marketing, and you want to surround yourself by people that are 10 times smarter than you. Yeah. And our role is our job is to empower them. Yeah. And I'm a big believer of empowering the leaders and the team around you. And that's why you've hired them. And so if we can empower them and provide that communication with them or the guidance that they need to make them better, fantastic, but empower them to let them go be great leaders themselves. And with communications in particular, that's one where they're so much better at it than I am, but I can spot exactly where we need to tweak or maybe make something a little bit better.
Speaking of empowerment, I have an operational question for you.
Okay.
How do you like to structure your leadership meetings?
So, great question. And
I'm just selfishly curious.
Yeah. Well, there's a couple layers to it too, right? You've got one-on-ones that I have with my leaders, and we keep to that regular schedule as much as we can. And some forms of those one-on-ones may look a little different. One's more formal, one's more informal, just based on the discipline of that person's role. But then as a team, as a leadership team, we get together weekly, and we stick to that meeting. We go through, oftentimes it's a lot of updates on my end, but it's very much a sharing, a collaborative discussion, and it's transparent. There's no hidden agendas. There's nothing that should be a surprise. And we'll keep to that meeting and keep to kind of measurement, constant measurement. We're looking at dashboards in one person's discipline more so than another, but we're looking at dashboards in our one-on-ones, and then we'll bring some of those analyses or even problem statements that we're discovering or things that need addressed to our combined leadership meeting. And then as a team, we get together a couple times a quarter as a large team and present, whether it's the metrics or whether it's programs and updates. And it's hard. The larger the team, the more remote it is. But what's important is that you keep the cadence. And if you have interruptions or you don't stay committed to it, then the perception can be that you don't care or that you're not being transparent. And I'm a big believer of share everything we have. And it's taken a long time to get to that data point where we have metrics that can be shared throughout the organization and then a more granular level within our own team. And so the more we share and provide those to others, the better we are at our jobs. And we get to question, how do we make it better? If we grew 20% this year, how do we grow that conversion rate to 25% next year? What can we do different? And that's where some of that creative mind meld and that thinking element comes together when you're brainstorming and you're saying, here's the challenge. We don't know what we're going to do. Or it can even be coming up with who our next keynote is going to be for a conference or an event.
That's great. Yeah. Really quick, in-house versus out-of-house agencies, in-house, out-of-house.
Yeah.
How do
I think about that?
How do you figure that out?
Well, I'll tell you, I don't know any marketing team, company, group that can be effective or scale or be as efficient as they really could be if you didn't have a combination of both.
Yep.
And some variability depending if I'm at a startup, like a true startup, which I could not do again. You're probably outsourcing everything because you don't have the budget to hire. But even as you mature, you have projects, and I may not have the skill set on my team for a project, and I may not want that skill set on the team long-term. And so being able to outsource, and whether it's outsourced to an individual or an agency, I'm a big fan. And if I look at our team today, I have a good amount of full-time staff, but I have a very large growing population of contractors on the outside. And you could over-index on that. One, because you get greater scale and you can pull those levers as you need them, again, based on project or based on need or just based on operational efficiency. And so I'm a big fan of a hybrid of those models. And I think one thing that's important is how do you communicate and how do you work with those, whether it's agency or contractor. So on the PR side, you have some agencies that maybe are a little bit more hands off. And then you have some agencies that really come in and they look like they're part of your team. You see them on a more regular basis. Your designers, oftentimes a very outsourced entity, but there's some designers that we really bring into the fold because they're such a vital component of our day-to-day operations. And so if they're not understanding, kind of the need and the scale and the timeliness of things, then they miss. And that's on us to communicate and really bring them into that conversation. But I'm a big fan. I don't know of anyone that could not be as successful if they didn't outsource. And again, outsource being agency, individual contractors, or just area of specialty. And, we talked about chat. I'm not an expert on it, and nobody really is.
Is anybody yet?
I'm
like, if you are, please call us.
It's a crapshoot. So, you're leaning on other people, and maybe what you're leaning on there is for someone just to invest the time to go figure it out for you.
Absolutely.
And that's okay, right? It doesn't have to be someone on your team, but they could come back with the recommendations. But, areas where we've really leaned on agencies is on the operational pieces, just the day-to-day execution, right? You can just get lost in the minutia. And so having someone else to be able to crank emails or implement lead scoring or design at such a frequent pace, those are great ways to scale events. Even sometimes we bring in some help on events, but there's other skills that you really just need in-house at all times.
Who do you think we should have on our show?
Gosh, you could ask so many people. It's, one person that I every time she speaks, I really appreciate what she has to say and her perspective. And she happened to be at a company that saw accelerated growth, and it took them public, and it was a right place, right time. She'll be the first to tell you. It was Carrie Lou Dietrich. And, she was at Atlassian.
Awesome.
And took it public. But her perspective on how she gives back today is really good. And she mentors people, but she gives back to the community. And so she'd be a really good person to bring on here.
Yeah,
and
she sounds like a great person to learn from.
You could learn a lot from her days at Atlassian, what she went through, how fast.
Yes.
And it was all new to her. She didn't have the book to guide her. And so that's a great story to hear from her perspective, but then what she's doing now and how she stays busy could be of great interest.
Okay.
Yeah.
Great. Thanks for the tip.
You're welcome.
Thank you.
Thank you for having me.
Really appreciate it.
Thank
It's been really fun.
Thank you.